Good morning. This is a meeting of the Baltimore City Health, Environment, and Technology Committee, and the committee is now called to order. I'm Danielle McCrae, the councilwoman representing the 2nd District and also chair of the committee. In attendance, we have Councilwoman Felicia Porter, representing the 10th District, and Councilman James Torrance, representing the 7th District. Councilman Bullock, Councilman Conway, Councilman Schleifer are absent. Councilman Ron Dorsey has an excused absence. Also joining us today are Preston Lewis from the Council President's Office, and from the Mayor's Office we have Adam Abadir and we have Sophia Gabrin-Hewitt. And also joining us is staff to the committee, Matthew Peters. Before we get started, just want everyone to take a moment to turn off or silence your cell phone. Also, if you have joined us in the council chamber and you would like to testify, there is a sign-up sheet just outside the door. Please sign in and check the box to indicate that you wish to testify. Today, the committee is hearing Resolution 22-0103R, Investigational Hearing, Sewage Backup, Expedited Reimbursement, and Direct Assistance Program Feasibility Study, for the purpose of inviting the city solicitor and representatives from the Department of Public Works, the Department of Finance, Baltimore City 311 Services, and the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management to appear before the City Council to discuss findings from the Department of Public Works study required by Ordinance 21-044. For this hearing, we're going to start with brief opening remarks from the resolution sponsors. Then we're going to hear from the agency representatives and have an opportunity for committee members to ask questions. After that, the public will have the chance to testify on this resolution. I do want to begin by thanking Councilmember Burnett for bringing this important resolution to this committee and continuing to take the lead in addressing basement sewage backups plaguing our most vulnerable residents. Councilmember Burnett first brought a resolution to this committee last April, briefing committee members and the public on the measures being taken by the city to address this issue, while also sharing detailed information on the basement backup reimbursement program and the sewage on-site support program. He then brought forth legislation requiring DPW to submit a study and report regarding the two programs and the feasibility of expansion, which was then published by DPW last October. The current resolution allows us to take a comprehensive look at the findings, address concerns and challenges, and ultimately comprehend how the city can best protect and serve residents with sewage basement backups. The shared aim is to minimize the current number of basement backups and enhance our established reimbursement and remediation programs. And we're now going to hear from the sponsor. Chair recognizes Councilmember Burnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues. So I think one, you did an excellent introduction as to why we're here. And so I'll just jump right in that the reason I wanted to continue to bring this before the council is, one, it's still a very much a public health crisis that is impacting far too many residents across the city and who are still reaching out looking for relief. I do want to thank DPW for taking the steps to establish the Expedited Reimbursement Program and the Sewage on Sites Program. But I'm here because I still think we can go a little bit further. So DPW's feasibility study recommends against expanding the expedited reimbursement and sewage on-site programs, but I think in some ways the findings actually demonstrate that both of the programs should be expanded. The study shows that there are far more dry weather backups every year in Baltimore City than wet weather backups, meaning that the majority of residents who experience backups are currently ineligible for those two support programs. And both programs remain significantly underutilized. The study shows that DPW used the SOS program to clean up only 14 backups from March to November of 2021. And since its launch in 2018, the Expedited Reimbursement Program has provided reimbursements to 18 people. I think that the DPW should work to improve support for residents who experience these backups with a few of these key recommendations. Maintaining the programs as they are, because again, I think the city has taken the right step in the direction by providing these programs. But I do think that there should be an expansion of the programs to cover dry weather backups. Additionally, there should be an expanded outreach and communication effort for both programs so that residents become more aware of the resources, including by using the DPW's hydraulic model to proactively reach out to residents likely impacted by sewage backup during rain events and not waiting for them to call 311 because a lot of people are unaware that they're supposed to do that in the first place. I think we can also work to improve the Expedited Reimbursement program by removing the $5,000 cap and allowing residents to get reimbursed for property damage, not just cleanup costs, and improving the SOS program by requiring contractors to get permission before throwing away residents' property, which is something that we've gotten feedback about, that residents would like an opportunity. Obviously, there's some public health issues with the material, but allowing residents to be able to decide if their stuff should be thrown out or not. These are some of the recommendations that I think we should be discussing today in the hearing, but obviously I'm looking forward to a good dialogue, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our agencies. Department of Public Works actually has a presentation, so we're going to hear from them last. For the city solicitor or representing the city solicitor's office, do you guys stand by your report or do you have anything else to add?
No, we stand by our report, Madam Chair.
Okay. Can you just state your name for the record, please?
Sorry, this is Hillary Ruley from the city solicitor's office.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rowley. We are requiring in advance that all agency representatives are present in chambers for the specific committee, but we did not communicate that previously, so just letting you know now. Thank you. For the Department of Finance.
Good morning, Mara James for the Department of Finance. We stand by our report. These programs are run by DPW using funding from the utility. And so we defer to them on the findings of this report and any other actions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. James. The Mayor's Office of Emergency Management.
Good morning, Elise Gillespie, Office of Emergency Management. We're here and available to answer any relevant questions to our agency in regards to this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. 311 Services, BSIT.
Good morning, Lisa Allen, Call Center Director for 311. We stand by our report. We're here to answer any questions you have about the process that relates to 311 calling. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Department of Public Works, I understand you all have a presentation.
Thank you very much. Marcia Collins, representing Department of Public Works. We have with us today Mohammed Rahman, who's going to be presenting the slide program, and we also have Janine Maxwell with us, who is in our legal counsel office, and of course Janelle Mummy. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mohammed.
Good morning, Madam Chair and honorable members of the council and everybody else. My name is Mohammed Rahman. I'm the Director of Special Projects in the Department of Public Works. I was the program manager for SOS program, Bbrp program, and Home Serve program, along with consent decree program when this report was prepared. I would like to start the presentation. Just wanted to kind of give a general definition of what building backup means and what causes building backup and stuff like that. A building backup occurs when the water is pushed into the dwelling through the pipes from a sanitary sewer or a drainage system. There are three major causes for building backup: pipe blockages, pipe failures, or inflow and infiltration or groundwater infiltration getting into our sewer pipes. Just to kind of go more into detail, this is how different causes can create pipe blockages. One of the reasons could be roots. Roots can get into our sewer pipes and create a blockage. And also the debris and rags and diapers and wipes that are disposed by general public into the sewer system can block the sewer pipes as well. And also the fat, soils, and grease we dispose of in the sewer system can create a blockage. Another cause for building backups is pipe failures. So because these pipes are, some of the older pipes are made of clay pipes or other material, you could have cracks. You can see some pipe offsets. You can see some of the pipes can be crushed as well or collapse. So this can cause inflow and infiltration of groundwater into a sewer system as well that can take up the capacity of the pipe. This is how inflow and infiltration looks like. Whenever it rains, the groundwater gets into our sewer pipes through the cracks and offset joints and all of that, and it takes up the capacity of the pipes. Just wanted to kind of define what different backups are. One of them is a dry weather building backup. So a dry weather building backup occurs when there is either a pipe blockage or a pipe failure in the city system. It could either be on the private side or on the public side. Traditionally, we tend to see any event when there is no rainfall or a rainfall less than quarter of an inch in 24-hour period. So it's defined as a dry weather building backup. A wet weather building backup is defined when you receive a rainfall of quarter of an inch in 24 hours. A wet weather backup can be caused because of pipe blockage, pipe failure, inflow and infiltration that can cause a sewage backup. However, wet weather may not be the primary cause for a wet weather backup as well. It could be other causes like pipe blockages that can cause wet weather backup too. There is a third type of backup, which we call it as wet weather capacity related building backup. This is different than wet weather backup because for a certain amount of rainfall, we receive a lot of inflow and infiltration in certain areas that would take up the capacity of the pipes, which would cause a surcharge in the system. Another way of determining this wet weather capacity backup is using a hydraulic model as well, and also doing some field verifications. So different natures of building backups, like building backups can be caused either on the private side or on the infrastructure on the public side as well. Just wanted to kind of give a basic explanation on the responsibility and what is considered as a private side and what is considered as a public side. So the pipe that comes out of a home is known as a sewer lateral. And then it has that clean out where a plumber can go in and clean that line. That sewer lateral is connected to a sewer main. So the sewer lateral up to the properties, end of the property is owned by the property owner, and it is property owner's responsibility to maintain that sewer lateral. So the portion of the pipe that is on the sidewalk and on the street is DPW's responsibility, and any sewer main is maintained and operated by DPW as well. So the property line is the one that defines the responsibility of either the private owner or the utility. This is a history of building backup in last 6 years. So as required in the ordinance, we did divide them based on the type of event and based on where we found the issues, what caused the issues and stuff like that. Regarding some introduction to the Expedited Reimbursement Program, this program was launched as part of the Modified Consent Decree. The Modified Consent Decree required us to implement a 3-year pilot program, which was started in 2018, where we provided expedited reimbursement for cleaning and sanitizing costs for sewer building backup up to $5,000. The eligibility criteria was limited to wet weather capacity related events. Some of the other criteria where the residents were required to submit the applications within 90 days, and city would take about 60 days or up to 60 days to process the applications. And one other requirement was the applicant is required to be a resident of Baltimore City. The current status of the program is we are still continuing to implement the pilot beyond 3 years. We have submitted a long-term plan to MDE, which was required under the consent decree. So this is the program summary. I did update the numbers from what's in the report to the latest numbers. So you could see like a lot more applications have been received since last year. One distinction that I would like to make is like and it might come up in the questions as well. Number of applications since last 2 years have been 0, and when we reviewed all of them, we realized that we were capturing a lot of those applications under SOS program. Just a little introduction of SOS program. SOS program was implemented outside of consent decree. It was implemented by DPW as a 1-year pilot program in March 2021 with the same eligibility criteria of wet weather capacity related events. The requirement for this program is that a resident would need to call 311 to report a building backup. Again, this program is eligible for residential customers as well, customers only, and we do have on-call contractors which are dispatched within 24 hours for addressing the qualified events. The current status of this program, the pilot period has ended now, but we are still continuing to implement that program, and we have also proposed to the regulators to replace Bbrp program with SOS program as it is more proactive. We did submit a long-term plan report to the regulators, which is still under consideration. Our team, my program team, does proactively check for program qualification for all the backups that is reported to 311. This is in addition to the field investigations that are done by the maintenance team. Regarding the feasibility studies, there were a few questions that were asked in the ordinance for DPW to report back on in the feasibility study. One of them was the current cost of Bbrp. So we did break down the actual cost of addressing a building backup using the Bbrp program. So if we did broke down those costs to 311 support costs, cost of investigation, cost of relief. So some of the costs are fixed costs that the department and 311 would have to incur irrespective of whether somebody submits a application to Bbrp or not. So the top 3 rows are the fixed costs, and the bottom 2 costs are the costs if somebody would submit an application. There's a cost for reviewing the application and a cost for, and the average cost of Bbrp reimbursement based on our previous records. So on an average, the average cost of Bbrp per application is $2,053.37. The other criteria that was used in the feasibility study was the cost of expansion for Bbrp program. So we used the average cost and used the number of backups, average number of backups in the last 6 years, and then we calculated the cost to be as you see on the screens. So we also did a cost analysis based on dry weather and wet weather as well, just to see how much cost it would cost to address dry weather building backups and wet weather building backups and the backups which are caused on the private side and which were caused because of issues on the public side. And these are the numbers on the screen. This is the current cost for addressing a building backup using the SOS program. It uses the same calculations. The top 3 numbers are the fixed costs, which are incurred by the department and 311 for addressing any building backup. And then the next 2 line items are the total cost for addressing a SOS event. So average cost of SOS program per event is $3,633.11. We use the same criteria as Bbrp for identifying the cost of expansion for the SOS program, and these are the numbers. The amount for expanding the SOS program to all basement backups will be $14.729 million per year. We did a similar cost analysis of dividing these numbers based on dry weather as well as wet weather events based on public and private issues. And the numbers that you see on the screen are the numbers from the feasibility report. This is the future of building backup program right now. City has proposed that SOS program be included in the modified consent decree as a long-term plan for replacement of the existing backup program. The existing program is based on the reimbursement model. That's a Bbrp program. We did get into much detail in the long-term plan why the SOS program is much better and much proactive than the Bbrp program. So this is the transition plan that we propose to the regulators. Like once we get an official approval from the regulators, we'll start informing the public about the closure of Bbrp pilot, and then we'll still keep the applications coming in for 90 days. After 90 days, we'll still allow customers to submit or residents to submit the applications for another 90 days. But we'll continue to implement the SOS program and do proactive outreach for implementing SOS program. Besides these two programs, I also wanted to highlight to the council and the general public that DPW as a department are implementing a lot of other programs to address building backups in the city. We have a lot of multiple conveyance upgrade projects that would increase the capacity of the sewer pipe. And we also have a lot of inflow and infiltration reduction projects, which are part of phase 2. What they do is like they reduce the groundwater infiltration into the sewer pipes. Right now, the department is finalizing the phase 2 plan of the consent decree, which is required to be submitted to the regulators by end of this year. We also do a lot of cyclical cleaning under the consent decree that will improve the operational efficiency. As you can see from the photo on the right, that's the kind of stuff that we are removing from the sewer pipes, which could take away the capacity and create blockages and stuff like that. Like we're pulling a lot of ropes and dirt and rags and stuff like that. We also do a lot of periodic sewer pipes under the consent decree. We are required to inspect all the sewer pipes above 10 inches and above in every 7 years. So we also do a lot of periodic sewer inspections to identify any deficiencies in this sewer pipe. We have a dedicated root control program as well as fog, fat soils, and grease cleaning program in the areas where we know which are prone to kind of like have root issues and fog issues. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Janine to talk about litigation cost as well as the legal. Thank you.
Good morning. Actually, I'd like to ask if there is a representative from the claims department joining us remotely, or if Ms. Ruley knows if someone will be joining to speak about this from the claims department.
My understanding is someone from the claims department might be, but I can't see remotely. I believe it's either Patrick Hancock or the deputy solicitor, but if not, I'm happy to speak to it.
Would you mind, or?
Sure. I mean, basically it's simple. If you have property damage related to a sewer backup, you would file a claim just like you would for any other property damage that you believe might be caused by the city, and then it's investigated by the claims department, and a decision is made as to whether it's, as was said, on the public side or the private side. So that's basically the process. If there are any questions on it, I can try to field those, but it's fairly simple.
Thank you. I'm going to move on, I think. Janine Maxwell, Deputy General Counsel for DPW. I went too far. Sorry about that. I'm here to speak about some of the challenges and policy considerations with expanding a program without regard to liability. The utilities must operate as separate, financially self-sustaining enterprises at all times without profit or loss that is required by the charter. Diverting funds to other programs increases the risk of insufficient revenue to properly operate and maintain the utilities. This also, diversion of funds may impact bond covenants of the wastewater enterprise funds, which my understanding from Department of Finance could be problematic to use enterprise funds on a program in which the city is not responsible for private assets, private sewer laterals, private property, things like that. The increased liability exposure to the city, should there be expansion without regard to liability. The city has an obligation, or needs an obligation, in order to perform cleanup services on private properties for basement backups. That's necessary, and that determination is made by determination of liability. Consider that without establishing first that the city has an obligation to go onto property, consider an instance where there's a sudden, unforeseeable, catastrophic event, such as a major failure in a pumping station or a sinkhole. We all know from North Avenue most recently. Major storms that lead to sewer backups that affect numerous homes at one time. The city could very well find itself in a position where it would have to pay to address an extraordinary amount of backups at the same time. Also, property damage and insurance claims that could result from the city doing work, again, without establishing an obligation to be doing the work in the first place, for alleged substandard work on private property, allegations of patent and latent defects to a property. Those allegations, just as they are now, as claims are investigated, excuse me, there's factual review that's conducted by the claims department, and that would need to happen in each and every instance up until or unless that the matter was resolved either by settlement between the parties or litigation. Also, a point to that, expansion invites advocacy for coverage for property and appliance damage costs. That makes the utility look more like an insurer than a utility, which it's not intended to be. Also consider that the city could find itself making unjustified improvements to private property. Also, moving on to the next slide, there is the consideration for the increased burden on the law department. Again, that currently analyzes general liability claims, which these would be basement backup claims, by deciding first if the city was negligent, and if so, whether the negligence resulted in the alleged damages. Consider also the current lack of resources and funding to investigate liability that the claims department experiences, or I should say the law department is experiencing now. Where would the resources come from to handle not only the current claims that come in, but the additional construction, insurance, property damage claims that will arise if there's, again, expansion without liability or without an obligation? And finally, consider the extent, as I've mentioned before, of the analysis and factual review that has to happen to investigate the increased number of backup claims. That process is lengthy, and it's unknown how long or extensive it will be. No one knows that at the outset. That goes against the one of the primary goals for providing a rapid response reimbursement cleaning program. That's a key reason why the Expedited Reimbursement Program was developed, with the narrow scope of claims, of basement backup claims that resulted from a wet weather event and related to a capacity-related area that can be identified and recognized. That smaller group would be the group where DPW could say, well, due to the fact that we're informed by the hydraulic model, we have some constructive knowledge that this backup, we know the cause of it, that it happened, we recognize the defect or the condition in the underground utility, therefore, it could be established for those claims. going beyond that, for all the reasons I mentioned, is really important to be considered. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to committee members and the bill sponsor for a few questions. I just have one question at this time before I move to Council Member Burnett, and I do want to know, maybe this is for DPW and Finance, I want to know if you all have collaborated to assess how federal funding like ARPA or the upcoming bipartisan infrastructure deal funding could be used to expand these two programs. Has that conversation already been taking place? Have you guys applied for ARPA funding for the expansion of these two programs?
So we did submit an application under the ARPA request for addressing all building backups using the ARPA funds. We did not receive funding, I believe.
So I know Ms. Kearney's not here, but was it denied, or is that still pending? Is that request still pending?
I would have to find that out. We did submit it last year, but we did not get any response yet.
Okay. For MOGR, can we get a status update on that ARPA request? Thank you. We're going to move to Councilmember Burnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first question I had was actually related to the presentation itself. On the slide where it talks about the cost of expanding the Expedited Reimbursement Program. There's a $2.5 million gap in the projected cost for expansion to all basement backups. Can you explain why is this a typographical error, or what would explain the gap in the projected cost annually?
Do you know which
In short, like 1 million, 1.5 million to all wet weather events, plus 4.2 million for all dry weather events doesn't equal 8.3 million. So trying to figure out what that gap is all about. And are there other costs that aren't listed here that could be contributing to that, and what those would be? I'd refer you to page number, but there's none on here. But it's this one that says feasibility study at the top. Cost of expansion for the Bbrp.
I believe it was a typo error. I can check and get back. The numbers comes from a detailed cost analysis that has been attached to the report. I would have to look into it.
Okay, if you could follow up with us on that to make sure we have sort of an accurate accounting there. Related to that, it's my understanding that there's been approximately $8 million allocated to these programs, but only 21,000 or so, just under 22,000 has been expended. Can you explain why that is, and why there's such a stark difference, and also where the money's going? If we've only kicked out 21,000 of an $8 million pot, what is the rest of the money being used for?
Yeah, so under the consent decree, we are required to maintain a budget of $2 million on an annual basis for reimbursement up to $2 million. So if the claims go beyond 2 million, we would only restrict up to 2 million. So that was a requirement under the consent decree. Now, the amount of reimbursements that were done, like the 22,000 numbers that you're mentioning, is based on the actual applications itself, the ones that were approved. So we wouldn't know, or we would only expend or reimburse the amounts for the applications we received and approved. But 2 million is just a budget.
Okay, so I guess where's the rest of the money going then? If it's not going to
So we are
reimbursement?
required to maintain that $2 million budget. So if we spend like say $10,000 this year on reimbursement, we replenish that $10,000 and still maintain that $2 million next year.
Do you have a follow-up on
I
that?
do have a follow-up with
All
that.
right. Well,
So
Madam
is,
Chair, she had a
oh,
follow-up on that.
that's fine. Thank you. So is the $2 million just a hold that you have to maintain in the budget? So to follow up on the councilman's question, how much of that $2 million is expended on the program? So it's $21,000 expended on the program and a $2 million hold. Can you share with us why we're not using why we're not using more of that $2 million to replenish, why we're not using more than the 21,000 of that $2 million budget hold for obviously a very critical need?
So because of the limitation of the scope of work of the program itself, we are only required to approve the building backups which are related to wet weather capacity related events only. So all the applications that are received, we review, our project team, program team reviews it. We make sure we check the eligibility criteria, we look at the causes for that backup. We make a determination whether the backup is capacity related or maintenance related. And then we either approve or disapprove the claim. And then the amount is reimbursed based on the approved claim.
I did have a follow-up question, sir, but I'll wait.
Go ahead.
Okay. But in your slide, the wet weather-related backup events for lateral was 273. The main line was 172. Grand total was 526 for building backup history. But the applications on the next slide, the applications that were approved, applications that were received were 8. 2 applications pending with none approved?
So you might be looking at different fiscal years.
Okay.
The 8 applications is for the fiscal year 2023, starting July 2022. If you're looking at the right fiscal year, that would be fiscal year 2021, where we received 43 applications and 5 of them were approved.
Yes. Okay. So I stand corrected on that correction, but it's still such a stark difference of the applications that were received versus the applications that were approved. It was only 5 approved.
That's correct. And that was based on the eligibility criteria. We reviewed all the applications. We reviewed all the 43 applications. Out of them, 5 of them were eligible for wet weather capacity related events. And one other distinction that I would like to kind of comment on is you did mention about the numbers, when you look at the numbers for wet weather capacity backups, we received 273 that were caused because of lateral issues. So those were the issues completely on the private side. And city would have no responsibility on those. And there were 172 events on the main line. And a lot of times, even though we classify them as a wet weather backup, but they might not be capacity related backups. They could be you would have a blockage in the pipe, you would have some roots or debris that could have, even though it looks like it might have been, the event might have been caused during a wet weather, but the actual reason, the root cause might have been a maintenance related issue that might have caused it.
I'll wait till my question.
So the question I have, the follow-up, for the $2 million set aside every year, obviously there's, again, that we've identified there's a huge gap. Is that money, is the money eligible for outreach and marketing efforts for the program?
So the outreach is done, I'm not sure how fiscal works, but we're required to have a dedicated $2 million just for reimbursement. Those $2 million is just for reimbursement.
Okay, and I'm asking that because I think there's obviously not only is there a stark gap in approved applications, but also the number of events that the agency knows has occurred versus the number of people applying indicates that people may not know this program exists or do not know this program exists. And I can speak anecdotally that in the community meetings that myself, my staff are attending, we rarely see DPW distributing information about these programs. And so I think, one, there's a lot of room for improvement on general marketing that this exists. But then there's also, you identified that the agency has a hydraulic model to identify residents that may have experienced capacity-related backups due to wet weather, but haven't reported it to 311. And we've seen that the agency, during emergency situations, E. coli, you were able to mobilize staff to go door to door to say, hey, there's a resource available to you, whether it's, water pickup or potentially, I'm not sure what the script was, but I think that we have an opportunity here to contact people through door knocking, door hangers, direct mailers, water bill inserts. Anytime that there's a wet weather event of a significant size, I don't see why liaisons shouldn't be canvassing an area to say, hey, you likely have had an event, these two programs exist, as a way to try and drive up participation in the program. And if nothing else, just as a good steward of the tax dollars that you're setting aside every year that aren't being expended, I think that obviously if it's going to be there, then there should be some other creative ways that we are proactively contacting residents so that they know what's available to them. Whether they get approved or not, obviously, is going to be something that has to happen on the back end, but on the front end, there's clearly a gap in knowledge of this program, given how many people are calling versus how many events we know occur. Is that something that the agency can take up?
Appreciate the comment, Councilmember. Few of the things we did highlight in the long-term plan by making a distinction how these programs, which program is much better and stuff like that. One of the things we did highlight was the outreach effort that we have undertaken on these two programs. There are some statistics that the regulators wanted us to provide as well, which we did in the long-term plan. We did send the brochures for the programs to up to 220,000 households. I got this number from Yolanda's group that they attend 15 to 20 community meetings per week where these programs are promoted. They put the brochures for residents to kind of pick up the brochures, and if there are any questions that comes up, they would answer those questions, and if not, they'll direct it to the program team as well. The other thing that our investigators also do is when somebody calls 311, we send our maintenance folks to investigate what caused the issue. So when they go there, they talk to the residents as well, and most of them do carry these brochures as well. The first thing, especially on SOS program, our investigators are the ones who are qualifying these residents for the program. When they see there is an issue with the system itself, they see that the system is surcharging and the system is out of capacity, they'll talk to the residents, they'll qualify the resident right away. What my team does is my team does a proactive check in the office using the hydraulic model data. And every phone call that is made to the city to 311, we look at the qualification for each phone call that has been reported for building backup. And say if a investigator went, sometimes you might have a lot of calls, a resident investigator might have gone to the site 3 or 4 hours after the event happened. So by the time they go there, they might not see what might have caused the event, because sometimes only when it rains, the system will surcharge. When the rain stops, you won't see the surcharge. So there might be a chance that an investigator might not see that surcharging happen. In those circumstances, what my program team is able to do is they're able to simulate the amount of rainfall that we receive and be able to kind of simulate a situation that might have occurred in the field. And we proactively qualify the customers for SOS program, and we offer the program as well. One of the other things that I would also want to add is when we were proactively checking and qualifying customers, one of the things that they didn't mention was sometimes they'll see a building backup, but the amount is not that great for them to kind of have a contractor come in, clean it. They'll just do it. They'll say oh, it wasn't that much, we'll just clean it ourselves. Or some residents would also say, we have home insurance, which will cover this, so we'll rather want the home insurance to come and clean it for us. One other thing that I would like to highlight about the program itself is every day we get a list of all the calls that have been made to 311. We get a list of all the building backups calls. One of my team member, Robin, actually, she goes through every call, every address, looks at we have multiple rain sensors around the city. We look at the amount of rain that is received in a certain area. And using the hydraulic model, we are able to kind of simulate the sewer system and see which areas might have been out of capacity. And then she would send an email saying, like, these are the addresses which can qualify for SOS program based on the call list from yesterday. So we do that on a day-to-day basis, every day. So we have 2 levels of qualification on the program. That's why we feel SOS program is more proactive, and it's capturing people even before, like, you know, they would even think about how they want to address the backup. Our efficiency rate is pretty good on the SOS program as well. We try to send the contractors within 24 hours. Sometimes we get delayed because of scheduling issues, like the resident would not want a contractor to come out right in the evening, or they would want to schedule on a certain day when they're off and stuff like that. So those are the only times we would have a little bit of delay.
Okay. Madam Chair, I have more questions, but I know committee may too as well.
We're going to go to Councilman Torrance.
So I have 2 questions and then a request. My first request is from the law department. I just wanted to really have a thorough discussion of like the liability portions of it, because homeowners, when it is an issue on our side, shouldn't have to assume the liability first, then go through the claims process to be reimbursed 2-3 years later, because I'm still emailing the law department and other agencies about this person hasn't been reimbursed yet, right? That to me is unacceptable when they have to wait to be reimbursed and they now take the liability on their own homeowner's insurance. And as the costs are rising in terms of insurance claims, the cost of materials, that is a burden that's placed on homeowners. The other thing I have is that, thanks to Mara, I looked at the fund balance that you guys have at the beginning of the year. Between Baltimore City and Baltimore County for your sewer charges, it's $317 million. This program will account for less than 2% of that $317 million. So I just want to really have a conversation about why are we not assuming more liability when it only would cost us an average of 2.62% when I just did the math. So I just want to understand why we're not, how about this? I want to understand why we're not proactively doing the expense and taking the time to do expenses for it.
Do you want to talk about liability?
There is someone on from the law department's claims division if you want to hear from him. It's Patrick Hancock.
Yes, Hillary, but I still want to make sure that we have a thorough memo that discusses the liability, especially with Maryland law, in terms of where we are and how our actual customers are assuming liability as well. I just want to make sure we do a thorough legal analysis of the litigation costs, but also the costs in terms of staff time in your office, because if we could proactively get the work done and not have to go through the liability process, and we can have people actually sign a disclosure that says that they're not going to pursue any litigation against us for latent things that we did not know about, then I think that's a different conversation. I just want to make sure that we have a thorough legal analysis, because the legal analysis I was given just now was, just problem solving it right there. I saw many loopholes that can lead to additional litigation without just being on the proactive side of it.
Right.
So I just want to make sure we first discuss why we have not why are we opposed to expanding the program to $8 million, which would be less than 2%, around 2% of what your current fund balance is at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Am I understanding? My apologies. This thorough discussion, that would have to be informed by fiscal. I mean, are you more telling me what needs to be scheduled, or?
No, I told her what needs to be scheduled. I
Okay.
just want to make sure why, as an agency, you've decided not to expand the program. As in, like, why is this your philosophy? Outside of that, I want to make sure that the law department is discussing this in a broader legal context of why the city's solicitor's office and others are afraid of expanding doing this program and expanding the costs, when we may actually lower our litigation costs, lower our staff time, and they'll be able to get to other claims, general claims. So I just want to have a thorough analysis, but I want to know why the agency is taking this stance, because it appears to be the agency's stance and not the city's stance, but the agency's stance.
Did you?
Councilman, as I understood your question, I think there were two questions. One of them was why the law department was taking much time to process some of the claims, and those were delayed, and how, like, do they have any staff issues and stuff like that? I think, like, I would refer that question to Patrick Hancock, who deals with the claims and litigations. They deal with the general liability claims, and they would be able to provide a much better answer on how much staffing they have and why do they take so much time to process liability claims. What my program does is, like, we don't look at the liability. We look at the cost eligibility criteria, and then we qualify the customer if they're eligible. And one of the analysis that was provided to us when we were finalizing the report that came from the law department was in the recommendations they did mention why these programs cannot be expanded because of the liability reason. I'm not sure, like, if anybody from the law department would be able to expand on that. They also give some legal references and different articles and city codes.
Okay, so we're having some technical issues. We're trying to get Mr. Hancock access so he can provide feedback on that one. At this time, Ms. Maxwell, was there anything additional that you wanted to add to that question while we're waiting for Mr. Hancock?
I just wanted, Madam Chair,
Sure.
Marcia Collins, DPW. Councilman Torrance, there are several issues here that we're talking about and how we expend funding under the two programs we currently have. Those are specifically related to the types of problems that the consent decree will be working to resolve. And that's why we have a wet weather event combined with a capacity. We have already identified areas in our system that are capacity related, but that will be corrected in future consent decree projects. So we already know, we have notice in effect to ourselves that that is a problem area. So those two programs were functioning around that premise, that until we can get these pipe systems expanded under phase 2 of the consent decree, we know there's an issue. And so we already know that there is a cause that's in our bailiwick to resolve. So that's why they can get approved for assistance. The other issue for us as an agency and as a utility has to do with what is our responsibility to rectify. And we, as a utility, should be expending funds on those issues, but not on issues that are not our responsibility to remediate. And so you have that tension between the desire to help people with basement backups, but that's why we look at the slide of public and private side issues. And it's, as an entity and a utility, we're only supposed to be expending our funds on that issue, separate and apart how people may feel about what we should be doing. That is one of the issues that we as a utility have to meet. I don't know if I've helped or confused.
So Marsha, I'm more concerned about cleanups, because that's the biggest issue, because no one wants to be in a home where they have mold, they're exposed to toxins and feces and other things, right? I feel like this. I want to make sure the law department understands. I'm separating the damage to their property in terms of, like, their personal property. I'm talking about the damage to their actual real estate home, as in their home. I just want to separate the two issues, right? Because I know that the personal property issue is going to have to go through our general claims process, but your analysis lumps them together in a way where it's just seems that we're just proactively trying to prevent both claims being immediately addressed on both personal and real property, right? My issue is the real property question and the liability. If we can address immediately, if I have a 90-year-old woman who has a dry weather event where our person came out, flushed the line, and now she has feces in her basement because of what we've done, and that may have been an issue that might have been on her private side, but we did something in our public side, and now it's in her home, which I have an example of. It's taken 2 years to get money back from the city, right? So why not we proactively clean her and remediate the issues that we caused through our own actions? I'm not going to say negligence, but our own actions to immediately do it. And then maybe we can go through the claims process with their insurance company to get our funds back if we find out it was an issue on their side, right? So I think that we need to really think the process of the issue differently, right? Especially since this council gets an opportunity to redistribute your funding and allocate things in this coming budget season, because this is a priority that many of us have actually articulated. I just want to be frank about it. So I just want to make sure you're proactively thinking about how we can use those funds, because $21,000 of $2 million, it looks like we're purposely just stifling our actual residents. So I'm going to stop because I don't want to just keep talking, but that is my request. I just want to understand the real property liability, not the personal liability, Hillary. I want to understand how we went through that analysis, one with Maryland law, and look at what is the controlling authority for it, and then look at ways that we as a city government can do some type of contract or some agreements with residents if we do assume some of this work, but not the liability, that they absolve us of that liability. So
Council member, I have Patrick Hancock on the line.
Oh, good. You were
now, so
able to
he's going to try to give you some feedback on your question.
Sorry.
Yes, hello. This is Patrick Hancock. I was muted now. I was muted before, but can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay, great. So a few minutes ago, there were the councilman asked some questions about liability claims. Perhaps you could restate that before I answer your question.
Councilmember Torrance, can you briefly restate your question? Thank you.
Mr. Hancock, my question briefly is, I just want to understand the analysis that we went through with the agency in terms of the claims process for the real property portions, to understand why we are not proactively expanding the program because of latent issues. Latent issues and all the other issues that will come with doing anything on someone's personal property, someone's real property, not personal property.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for the question. So just want to reiterate that these are two separate and distinct programs. So within the law department, we do have the claims office. Central Bureau of Investigation is its name. And here we look at claims that come in for sewer backups, just like every other claim. And we need to review those issues on a case-by-case basis to determine if there was liability, ergo negligence on the part of the city that led to the incident, just like we do for auto accidents or any other type of claim. That can't be done immediately. We do get the claim in, we do request records, and sometimes we do find that, like in some of the slides you've already seen, there was grease in the line, rags, debris, maybe a collapsed pipe. And under the parameters of determining whether there was liability on the city, if the city had not had an opportunity to know about it, that it simply responded at the time, or that we find, in fact, that the backup was caused by an issue with the citizen's own side of the line, the lateral, then the claim would be denied. There are times that constituents have insurance and just like every other type of claim, we work with the insurance company on those, which are subrogation claims. So we pay claims, again, based on whether there was negligence. In those cases, we reimburse the constituents, but that is a separate type of analysis than would be done under these other programs, which are being proposed. They are closer to the time that it happens, contractors being sent out regardless of what caused the backup, whether there's a wet weather related issue. So while it may seem a little difficult especially for constituents to understand, there is a liability claim process, but then there is Public Works' own programs.
I would like a meeting. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Abadir. Councilman Torrance, did you have any additional questions at this time?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I have a quick question. This is going to be for Ms. Allen within 311. There was a recent report, I believe this report was commissioned by Blue Water Baltimore and some other organizations as well. Within that report, specifically on pages 6 through 7, they talked about the script that we have for when people, the 311 script, excuse me, for when people call in about basement backups. And one of the recommendations was that we actually add something to the script, alerting folks about the options that they have for these programs. Is that something, I know that the report came out, I believe, not too long ago, but has that been added to the script, or is that something that you all can do in the future?
Thank you for your question. The script that we use when someone calls up and says they have water in their basement or sewer water in their basement is we put in a service request for a sewer water and basement. We then pass that on to DPW for the investigation of whether or not, you know, it is sewer water in the basement, whether they qualify for the program. In regards to the script, the agencies can work with us to revise the script. It's very simple to do, but the agencies do provide us with the questions to ask for each service request. So we can work with that, but that has not been done right now, but it's something that's pretty simple.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. For DPW, we're talking about proactive items that we can take care of right away for our residents. Can we make sure that you guys have a conversation with Ms. Allen about updating that script? I understand that you guys are spending resources that you stated earlier in pulling 311 calls, but I want to also make sure that, say, for any reason, an investigator does not get to, say, that property, or maybe that person hangs up, maybe they're frustrated, that they're still given that information on that call that these programs are available. After that communication is had with Ms. Allen and her team to update the script, can you guys update the committee on what that meeting or brief meeting look like and how soon this can be implemented within the script?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing that I would like to highlight is, like, when we were implementing the SOS program pilot, what we did as part of the process was, like, we had a quarterly evaluation of the program itself. We brought in all the stakeholders, including 311 call center, to kind of see what was the response, what kind of questions they were getting and stuff like that. One of the things that were highlighted by the maintenance department were a lot of times 311 would get calls of water in the basement. They might have been classified as wastewater, but then once they investigate, they would be able to kind of properly classify those calls into right order. Like, sometimes people might think it's wastewater in their basement, but sometimes you'll see some infiltration, like groundwater infiltration coming into their basement as well. Like water seeping into their basement and stuff like that. So when an UMD investigator, our maintenance investigator would go in there, they will know exactly what's causing in there and they'll classify it correctly. So sometimes one of the things that came up in our calls were like, if you're offering these program, there might be a possibility that you're giving out wrong information to the residents and misguiding them in a sense. Like if there is any groundwater infiltration seeping into the basement, and then you're saying you are eligible for reimbursement for that, we might be giving out wrong information. So we thought it would be better that the investigator gives that information to them once they verify that the backup is properly classified in the system. You know what I'm saying? But we can re-look into it and see if there are any other better ways we can improve our outreach.
I think on a proactive side, it needs to be included within the script. If we're sending out something to 200, or you guys are quoting it, we're sending pamphlets out to 220,000 residents, or that we're at community meetings, and just know I don't think that that's enough engagement with community meetings, because obviously most residents don't attend community meetings. And it's the same residents, same 10 people for many community meetings over and over and over again. So they get that pamphlet every week and they're not passing it on, more than likely. I would like to see it added to the script. And again, I don't think it's any different than when we're proactively giving out 220,000 brochures. If the investigator's still going, then they're still going to assess if they're part of the program. So we're looking for proactive measures and easy measures that we can also just take care of.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Burnett.
So we covered almost everything. I would just second that. I think it's important for people to be educated regardless of liability, and I think that obviously you have attorneys on your team, you have the law department that can work on ensuring that the script isn't conveying responsibility, but is an education tool that, you know, hey, we've made this engagement, perhaps this one isn't eligible, but in the future, because oftentimes, I mean, yes, I agree, sending something out proactively is great, but people may not think about that brochure until they need to think about the brochure, and by that point, it could have been, you know, it's already in the recycling or wherever else, you know, because it's not really top of mind. And I even, you know, I did some distribution myself at the last few community meetings I've attended, and most people hadn't heard about the program, hadn't seen the paper before, and I'm not saying you didn't give it to them, but people seem like, oh, this is great. Again, if they didn't have water in their basement that time, they might have just walked out of that meeting and tossed it in the recycling again. And so I think the script is important because they're already reporting something, so they already know that there's a problem. And two, I would just stand up that if your model is showing that there's some proactive attempts to reach out to a specific area, bringing a liaison with you to canvas that maybe some footprint, you know, a certain radius around that model, I think would be, again, another proactive step, because at that point, neighbors are talking. So while everybody may not have experienced a backup that your model is predicting may have happened, they're still maybe thinking about it. Now, you know, my friend Adam across the street got a backup. Oh, crap, like, this is a great opportunity for the agency to talk to the person even if they didn't have a backup, because now it's still sort of top of mind. And so that may go from something that they're putting in the recycling to they've put down the magnet on the refrigerator to remind themselves that, hey, I'm one of them in the area that this could be taking place, and two, it could be me next. And so knowing what to do, I think, is important for everybody involved. But I didn't have anything else, but, you know, between yourself and our colleagues, I think we covered everything I wanted to cover, Madam Chair.
Okay, and Ms. Maxwell answered many of the questions that I had. Thank you. Committee members, you guys are good? Okay, perfect. So we're gonna move on to public testimony at this time. Members of the public, you will have 3 minutes each to provide your testimony. As a reminder, if you're in the council chamber and would like to testify, please sign in and check the appropriate box on the sign-in sheet just outside the door. If you have joined us via Webex and you would like to testify, please use the raise hand function, to let us know. We're going to start with the testimony of members within, of residents within the chambers. I have Matthew Price. And when you come up, Please state your first and your last name and if you're with an organization before you begin your testimony. Thank you.
So yeah, my name is Matthew Price, and I'm with Blue Water Baltimore. I've been an intern there for just over like a month, and in that short time, I've learned a great deal about the sewage issues in our city. So today I would like to share with you a few findings. So as many of you know, Maryland is fortunate enough to have the highest median household income of any state in the United States, but unfortunately not all Maryland, shares in that wealth. For example, in Baltimore City, the neighborhood of Grove Park, their median household income was just $29,000 in 2015. Grove Park and nearby neighborhoods in northwest city of Baltimore are some of the worst affected by the ongoing issues of sewage backups. In April 22 alone, Northwest Baltimore reported about 98 of the 418 reported across the city for that month. Grove Park and West Arlington had 14 reported that month, and other neighborhoods in Northwest have staggering amounts that lead this statistic to about 98. As damage cost claims for sewage-related backups, I averaged at about $6,000, and many applicants exceed this number. This is a devastating blow for many residents. Though DPW, the health department, and the city strongly advise residents to seek professional help to clean up the backups, many residents are forced to clean up sewage backups themselves simply because they cannot afford professional services. These incidents therefore leave them at extreme risk to exposures such as diseases like cholera and hepatitis A. At the heart of this issue is that SOS and ERP's eligibility criteria is far too narrow. Specifically, the requirement that residents can only qualify for these programs if their backup occurred in connection with a wet weather event. Examining any quarterly report by DPW shows that the vast majority of these backups are in dry weather, instantly eliminating any chance of reimbursement or direct cleanup, and by extension, any hope that these programs can be effective. SOS and ERP have to be expanded to dry weather events to protect public and environmental health, and to improve the living circumstances of lower income residents. Many residents most affected by backups are already far below the median household income of the city and state and cannot risk the financial burden of backup-related expenses with no chance of reimbursement, cleanup support, no chance of justice. ERP and SOS expansion could mean fewer families in debt, less property damage, fewer homes being foreclosed on, and a lower chance of residents getting sick. The expansion of these programs would quite literally save lives. I think it's a human rights issue. A former landlord testified about the sewage backup problems back at a hearing in November 2019. She spoke about how she had abandoned her investments in the city simply due to the sewage situation and basement backups. The less effectively Baltimore deals with sewage issues, the more people such as this landlord will avoid investing in the city, and the more residents' financial situations will be strained. This is not the path any of us want Baltimore to be on, but it is the reality under the narrow criteria of ERP and SOS programs. SOS and ERP must be expanded to include dry weather events. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Next, we're going to hear from Rita Cruz. Miss Rita Cruz.
Good morning, Madam Chair and other council members. My name is Rita Cruz. I'm president of Bella Edison Community Association. I am here today on behalf of my residents to get more assistance with the sewage backups. According to 311 calls, Bella Edison has a high volume of calls for sewage backup. I am aware of the two programs that offer assistance, but they're not effective. 2 years ago, I had a minor sewage backup in my basement, and I didn't know about the assistance programs for residents. Thank God I contacted my insurance company, and with the little money I saved from my retirement, I was able to get immediate action help with my backup and not endure a smelly basement. However, all residents in Bella Edison or in Baltimore City cannot afford to replace damaged furniture. ruined tiles, or carpet, or entire basement floors, or getting rid of stinky smells, mold, and contaminants. During the summer, Blue Water Baltimore, Bel Air Edison Community Association, and the University of Maryland College Park participated in a sewage backup outreach activity in which we actually knocked on doors and listened to my residents' narratives about the terrible impact of sewage backup. We found many of my residents were not aware of any assistance programs. Also, the few who did know something about them, when they contacted those two organizations, they did not qualify. I have a few recommendations just for, number one, as soon as a 311 call is reported about a sewage backup problem, please get on the case immediately. Expedite the reimbursement program as quickly as possible because people have bills to pay. They have food to eat. So please help us. And also improve the reimbursement SOS program. And even the residents who do not call 311 to report sewage backups because of whatsoever reasons, there needs to be something in place to reach out to them and to assist them. And lastly, my residents and I are hardworking people, and we deserve the same quality of life as anybody else. We choose to live in Baltimore City and Bel Air Edison. So please help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rita. We appreciate your testimony. Also, thanks for your advocacy within Bel Air Edison as well as the entire city. We are going to go to Ms. Diana Geis.
Hello, I didn't know I was going to be limited to 3 minutes, so I'm sorry. I'll have to cut some things out, but I have copies of my testimony, and I also have some photographs if anybody would like to see them. I'd be happy to share those. Oh, is that better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hi. I'm Diana Geis, and I live in Berry Circle at 734 McHenry Street. I own my home, and my house and my basement were affected by a sewer backup at the end of June. Thank you very much for having this hearing. It shows that you're taking this disaster seriously. I'm not exactly sure when the flood happened, but by Saturday, June 25th, there was 8 inches of backed up sewer water in my basement. I was visiting in Ohio when I received a call from my neighbor to check my basement. I called my son, Tom Geis, who came to my house to remediate the situation the best he could. And I do have photos if you want to see them. What he found was chaos in my basement and in the neighborhood with neighbors outside wondering what to do. 311 was called. Baltimore City DPW arrived to pump out as needed. Tom managed my sump pump, as did those neighbors who had them, but some did not. The city and my sump pump dumped a lot of sewer water into the storm drains that lead to the Chesapeake Bay, as did the neighbors' sump pumps and the companies hired to drain the basements without sump pumps. It all went into the storm drains, and I just want to make sure that you understand what happened to the sewer water. The backed up sewer water went into the Chesapeake Bay, so that's probably not a good thing. I'm going to have to do some skipping here. I'm not sure what to skip, so I hope I haven't skipped anything important. I met with Felicia Porter, intent on making sure that DPW would fix this issue. I spoke with her about holding DPW responsible for fixing this reoccurring issue that happens in our neighborhood. It's a long-term issue, goes back 20 years or so. This happens, never this bad, at least once a year when the wipes clog the drain that goes underneath Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. It's the drain that goes between Berry Circle and Ridgely's Delight. When it happens, DPW comes out to, they call it blow out the pipes, and then it's all good for another year or so. I also asked her about restitution I might be entitled for my losses. She told me about a program that would help with sanitizing, but I don't qualify because I have insurance, and that program is for weather-related backups. I have an option to seek legal action, but until I see the final settlement from the insurance company, I won't make that decision. Please consider inserting into your protocol for managing disasters a way to offer financial restitution when a city-responsible disaster occurs, like sewer backups. Yes, the infrastructure's old, the city's old. My house was one of the dollar houses from the 70s, although I paid more than that when I bought it 5 years ago. The house was built around 1850. It's really unacceptable for homeowners and their private insurance to have to bear the full burden of damage as a result of deficiencies in the city infrastructure and maintenance. This should not be the responsibility of homeowners' insurance. Consider, because it actually makes our insurance costs go up, so it affects us long-term as well as short-term. Consider a program that honors our time and money for what insurance and the sanitizing program does not cover. And consider a program that takes responsibility for damage caused by failed infrastructure. To change the tune just a little bit, I would like to take my hat off to the Baltimore DPW for their quick response in helping us with our flooded basements, for clearing the clog in the pipe in a timely manner. They were good. For helping all the distressed neighbors, including my son, they were great. And now, recently inserting a smooth, state-of-the-art liner in the offending sewer pipe that will make passage of difficult items easier.
Ms. Geis, we're grateful for your testimony. Can you close out at this time? Thank you.
I just wanted to compliment them. Okay. Anyway, thank you. But they do need a schedule for checking the pipes as well, and that would be a recommendation for checking it as well as having the new liner in. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to City Hall to share your testimony in person. Yes, our staff is going to get it so we can make sure it's uploaded in full. Can we scan it and put it with our testimony? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Geis. We're going to hear from Crystal Parker.
Good morning, representatives, and thank you very much for having this hearing and taking this issue serious in all of the departments that are represented here today. My name is Crystal Parker, and I am the president of the North Avenue and Hilton Street Business and Community Task Force. Fortunately, I've not experienced a sewage backup myself. However, as a community leader, I had the unfortunate experience of assisting several residents who were a part of a building condemnation. What was more appalling is that I found out that one of the residents who was there living with his elderly mother and caring for her, who was disabled as well, mentioned to me that they probably 5 to 7 months out of the year experienced sewage backups in their basement apartment. And the more appalling thing about this is that a lot of residents, particularly renters, because it happens so frequently, they just think it's a common occurrence. And they don't have the information to report. You know, they don't know what remedies there are for them or if they even have any. So my concern is that there needs to be more information and more accessibility to programs for homeowners and renters. One of the things that would happen, because this is a public health problem, we don't want people putting their hands in raw sewage or thinking that that is normal. One of the things that I think it would prevent is also landlords of multifamily dwellings who don't pay attention to these issues or not concerned about the living conditions of their residents. So if we were more proactive and expanded the programs, even expanded 311 calls so that tenants or leasers could call, and then we could get code enforcement out, we would have more proactive attention to concerns that affect the public health and safety of the community. I believe that canvassing and door hanging, that would help to give residents proper attention. When you get something that's just in the mail, it goes with everything else, and people don't know how to facilitate even the process when they get those things in the mail. Proactive canvassing, door hanging provides the opportunity for comprehensive engagement, questions and answers. And then the community associations or people that are in the communities that are advocates, we can then help to pick up those pieces and help our residents through that process. So I would like for this program, it needs to be extended. It is a matter of public health and public safety. No one should have to live in those types of deplorable conditions. So please extend the program, find the money for it, do what needs to be done for the public health of our citizens of Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We're going to hear from Ms. Deborah Downs. Okay, take your time.
Yeah, I slipped down the steps at night. Good morning, Madam Chair. I did find it very important to be here this morning. Good morning to everybody. I haven't had a backup, but I've been living in Bel Air Edison for 30 years. I am the trustee of the, not the trustee, I'm sorry, I'm the treasurer of Bel Air Edison. I am under the leadership of Rita Cruz, and she couldn't have said it no better than I could ever begin to say it. And yes, it is very important for everybody to be able to have access to the information that is needed so very much for people that have backups. I walked around the residents for those backups, persons that had the backups. Like I said, I didn't have one personally, but I found it important to be able for them to have the resources that they needed for the backups that they had, to get that information out to them and for them to be able to have it. So like I said, I'm not going to be up here long because like Rita said it all. I couldn't say no more than what she said, and I couldn't begin to say what she said, but it is important. I did go into one young man's home. He is about 80 years old. He had cancer, taking care of his wife who had cancer, who would have been just out of the budget for the money to be able to afford, and he couldn't afford to fix his home, but his home was filled with mold in his basement, which I almost cried talking to him, trying to get him to understand that I'm gonna make sure that if I can talk to the people, that they can try to make a way to find out how they can get the resources to try to help him and his wife. Because, you know, it's kind of hard when you go into a home after he done worked so long for the state of Maryland, because he worked for the state of Maryland. And it makes your heart bleed for those kind of people who done worked all their lives. And then they can't get the resources that they need when they need the help. And all he's doing is trying to take care and try to make ends meet, you know. So I feel so grateful to be able to do the job that God put me here for to do when I go out and help others, you know. So that's the reason why I'm here today, even though I'm in pain today. But I'm here to be able to go out to help the other person, because there's the day that somebody might have to help me. So I'm grateful. So please, I'm thankful. So just let us all work together to make it work. Thank you so much.
We are grateful for your testimony. Thanks everyone for joining and representing the many people who were unable to make it to City Hall today to speak about their experiences with sewage backups. We are going to move on to testimony from the Webex platform. For our Webex attendees, you will have 3 minutes for your testimony. If for any reason your testimony is longer, you can always email it in and provide it to us, and we will make sure that it's uploaded to the bill file if for any reason you need more than 3 minutes. We're going to move on to Taylor Smith-Hams at this time.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Taylor Smith-Hams, and I'm the Advocacy and Outreach Senior Manager at Blue Water Baltimore. As you've heard today, sewage backups are a major problem in Baltimore City. I've gone door to door with community leaders like Ms. Rita Cruz and Ms. Deborah Downs, speaking with residents who have faced this dangerous and traumatizing environmental health hazard. I've been in basements where the stench of human waste was so strong I had to walk outside, even though I was wearing a medical grade mask. I've heard countless people tell me that this is what they expect because they live in Baltimore. And several people have laughed in my face when I asked if they received any help from the city in the aftermath of sewage backups. I've heard from residents who actually did receive help from the city after a backup, only to have sentimental belongings and prized possessions thrown away without their consent when contractors came to pump sewage out of their basements. More often, I've heard residents describe how they cleaned up sewage on their own with shop vacs and that they experience anxiety anytime it rains because they don't want it to happen again. This is unacceptable and appalling. No one should feel that raw sewage backing up into their homes is inevitable because of their zip code. No one should feel that their government cares so little about their well-being that it's not even worth contacting 311. No one should be gaslighted by city officials who go out of their way to blame the resident for a sewage backup instead of providing desperately needed assistance. But this is a lot of Baltimoreans' lived experiences. Baltimore City must take urgent action to eliminate sewage backups into people's homes, and in the interim, improve the expedited reimbursement and sewage on-site support programs based on residents' experiences. In particular, DPW should lift the ERP's arbitrary $5,000 cap, expand reimbursement to cover property loss in addition to cleanup costs, and require SOS contractors to gain explicit resident permission before throwing away property. DPW should also use its hydraulic model to proactively contact residents that may have experienced capacity-related sewage backups due to wet weather, even if they didn't report it to 311. These recommendations and others are outlined in more detail in our written testimony. We urge you to take immediate action to provide better support for residents who are bearing the burden of this city's old and crumbling infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor, and thanks for your advocacy throughout many of our communities regarding this issue and many more. We're going to move on to Melissa C. For Webex attendees, please state your full first and last name, as well as if you're representing an organization as well.
Melissa Kennedy.
And Melissa?
Yes.
Okay. You can start when you're ready. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Melissa Kennedy. I live in the Bbrp Park community in the 21205 zip code. I'm the outreach liaison for Bbrp Park, started in December 2019, and then in April 2020, and then January 2022, I started having sewage backups in my basement. And I called DPW, and they came out, and they sent somebody out to check the basement and said, oh, your pipes need to be cleaned. Yeah, I know that. And then I called a friend who is on advocacy on sewage backups for everyone, Jennifer, and she told me to call HomeServe because I have HomeServe insurance. So I called HomeServe. They sent someone out. He snaked the pipe, and he snaked my pipes 3 feet out into the middle of the street, and said that he was pulling back tree branches, and that was my backup problem. DPW, I called 311 back. DPW told me that, oh no, that's my problem. It's on my side of the street, and I had to have it taken care of. And Jennifer told me to call back and ask them about the SOS program. And when I called to ask about the SOS program, the lady on the phone said, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know nothing about that program." I said, "Oh, okay, that's fine." So HomeServe came and they sent somebody out to clean my basement. I had to file a claim with my homeowner's insurance, and as a result of all three of them, I had to file 3 claims with my homeowner's insurance. And as a result of that, I'm being canceled from my homeowner's insurance at the end of the year because of sewage backups. And that's not fair to me. This is not my problem. The problem is in the middle of the street, and DPW doesn't want to come and clean that. And I'm stressed. And then this year, Mr. Vince Palmer called me and said, "Oh, we want to put a backflow backflow preventer into your house, want to install it." And I was like, "Well, okay, well, that stopped my sewage backup." He said it may prevent them, but it hasn't really, because I'm still having the backflow in my sinks and stuff. And so they put it in there, and then after they installed it, he told me, "Oh, well, you're not qualified to put in any more claims to DPW or the city because you have a backflow preventer." So thank you for letting me testify today. But what am I supposed to do?
Thank you, Ms. Melissa, for sharing your testimony. We are going to go to Leah Kelly.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Leah Kelly, and I'm an attorney with the Environmental Integrity Project. My organization focuses on environmental laws, but we have done some research on the liability issues that are being discussed here, and just want to provide some additional information about that. And I want to start by thanking Councilman Torrance for his comments, because we share his concerns about the statements that are being made. To start out with, I want to clarify that the push from the advocacy organizations is not to expand to private, to backups that are caused in the private part of the system. We understand that the programs, the current SOS and expedited reimbursement programs, are limited to backups originating in the public portion of the system for liability reasons, which makes sense. And so I just want to clarify that the primary interest here is in expanding from wet weather backups to dry weather backups. The statements about the reason to limit the programs to wet weather backups and not to expand to dry weather backups based on liability issues are quite confusing to us. We researched this and we could not find any legal support for the idea that there is a legal distinction relating to liability between wet weather backups and dry weather backups that originate in the public portion of the system. And by looking for legal support, I mean we were looking for decisions by judges. From what I understand based on DPW's testimony, the idea is that the hydraulic model could be considered to provide constructive notice in a negligence analysis. We were not able to find any case law that supported this idea. In addition, the city has ongoing obligations relating to inspection and maintenance of pipes that could be, under the same theory, that could be construed to provide constructive notice of pipe blockages as well. In addition, these are voluntary programs. Mr. Hancock from the law department said that the full liability analysis for the general claims program is different from the liability analysis for the SOS and the ERP programs. So we just don't see any basis for that distinction. And then the last point that I want to make is that in terms of increasing burden on the city law department to make liability determinations, at least for the SOS program, that is not supposed to involve a liability analysis. Mr. Rahman actually mentioned that the DPW investigators are the ones who qualify residents for the SOS program. So at least for expansion of the SOS program, that should not be a concern. I see that my time is up, and I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Leah. We're going to move to Natasha Box Singleton.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. First, I want to thank the council members for all of your incredible efforts to mitigate this problem for your constituents. Thank you, Chairwoman McCray, for facilitating this hearing. Pardon me. Thank you, Councilman Burnett. Again, always continuing to push so fiercely for the residents that are impacted by this issue. My name is Natasha Box Singleton. I'm a former community leader from Southwest Baltimore. I currently run Bloom and Grow, which is a nonprofit that provides community support resources and programs across the Mid-Atlantic. Professionally, I spent 20 years in the health insurance industry managing compliance for a Fortune 5 company. So I am fully aware of both the liability and litigation concerns, as well as the public health concerns from the sewage backup issue. Personally, I had sewage backup into my basement, so I understand it personally. My organization, Bloom and Grow, has a group of volunteers that will go door to door in Southwest Baltimore, notifying residents of the resources that are available. And we follow information that is publicly available on the Watershed Resource Management website, which is a partnership between EPA and the Department of the Environment. It's very similar to the hydraulic model that DPW uses, but it's publicly available. And in doing so, volunteers, who primarily are teenagers from West and Southwest Baltimore, have identified hundreds of residents impacted by basement sewage backups who had no knowledge of any resources available to them. In District 10 alone, we've used $360,000 of private donations to provide cleanup, supplies, housing for residents while their properties were being cleaned, and mitigation so that this wouldn't happen to them in the future. And that's just a resident-driven, volunteer-driven organization. I really want to thank Councilman Torrance for that statement on liability and litigation. And I want to say that if this is something that a volunteer organization can do with private donations, I think that you need to push the law and the DPW department to look further into expanding the proactive outreach and coverage for both dry and wet weather backups so that you can broaden the scope of resources available to all residents. Because in the end, you are going to have what you heard happen in West Arlington, where property owners, landlords, homeowners are going to start abandoning their properties because nobody wants to live in a house with sewage in the basement. And you're not going to be able to come back from that as a city once you start to lose whole blocks to this sewage problem. I have all of our data and all of our documentation available. I've submitted multiple times. I'd be happy to submit that again to this committee. And again, thank you so much for allowing the testimony.
Thank you for your testimony. We're going to go to Jennifer Combs.
Everybody, thanks so much for having this hearing today. My name's Jennifer Kunze. I'm the Maryland Program Coordinator with Clean Water Action, and I'm a resident of McElderry Park. And I know that the committee members received Clean Water and Blue Water's report with our analysis and recommendations for the sewage backups programs, and I want to walk you through 3 of our policy recommendations and why they're so important. Because the raw data that's contained in the department's report very clearly shows the need to expand and improve upon the ERP and SOS programs. So recommendation number 1, the city should maintain both assistance programs. The department has plans on file with MDE to stop offering the ERP program. And we do agree that the SOS program is more effective and more equitable. The data shows that it's more used. But the ERP provides an important stopgap for people who experience a potentially qualifying backup, but who fall through the cracks and are not offered assistance through the SOS program during that crisis situation when they have sewage in their basements. And the data shows that that's a really big crack, and a lot of people are falling through it, some of whom we've heard from today. DPW says that there were 253 wet weather backups with a cause in the city system in last year, and only 17 cleanups through the SOS program were offered. And an important distinction between ERP and SOS is that it's the department's it's on the department to offer that cleanup rather than the ERP where the resident is responsible for applying. So the department only offering 17 backups and leaving 236 wet weather backups with a cause in the city sewer system unhelped through the SOS is really concerning. Related to that, the city needs to better advertise both of these programs. Our analysis shows that last year, when we had those 236 wet weather backups with a cause in the city system, 78% of those households were not reached by either program. Anecdotally, we've heard from many people, I can back it up from my own experience, that many residents who should know about these programs have not been informed. So that's a big problem. And then third, the city can and should expand these programs to cover any backup with a cause in the public system, regardless of the weather. Like Leah said, we want to be very precise that we're talking about sewer backups with a cause in the city system, not those purely caused by the private lateral. Excluding dry weather backups excludes the vast majority of people experiencing sewer backups with a cause in the public system. Last year, we had the 250 so backups in wet weather with a cause in the public system, but over 1,000 dry weather backups with a cause in the public system. That's confusing for residents. It breeds mistrust in the process, and it's absolutely important that residents who are experiencing sewer backups through no fault of their own aren't forced to put themselves in contact with other people's sewage coming from the public system, but that they can get that help from the city with the cleanup and disinfection for public health reasons. So please move towards making these recommendations a reality, and thanks again for your time and attention.
Thank you. Ms. Jean Collins.
I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've lived here for 22 years. It's a neighborhood of Richley's Delight. I just want to go on record to say I've had some issues from November 2020 with water in my basement in the front, December 2021 with sewage water, and the middle of the basement in April 22 when I was going to get work done on masonry and on the bricks in the back. I found that there was water infiltration from tree roots that had been removed from a city-side tree maybe 15 years ago. With all of that said, I can't go deeply into everything. I've been with the claims department. I found out about the 2 programs, and because of the disconnect with the departments of DPW, forestry, footpaths, and claims, the back piece, which is connected to a larger issue from when you take a tree out, when the pipes are infiltrated and the water is still going into the bricks. And I've called 311, footpaths has not come, and it's all connected to initial sewage water from the front. I wouldn't even known about the back pieces. So with each component of whatever issue I'm dealing with, I've asked in multiple emails to just sit with teams, to talk to different people. I've sent all of the emails to neighborhoods between Federal Hill, Cherry Hill, to see to Berry Circle, to Pigtown, to see like who's having the same issues. And it's approached in the same way. I'm asking for some of the consideration to be extended, not just beyond sewage, but just to find out, meet with people in an open forum similar to this, and just take the time, because now it's a foundational issue, and I'm in between 2 other homes with 20 bricks beneath me and beside me. So if because of the water infiltration, the bricks are now moving, I'm in jeopardy of losing my homeowners insurance because it's not being fixed, and nobody's come out to take a look at what's going on. And mind you, the last email I sent was in July. So if nobody comes and the bricks fall based on the snowball effects from the initial problem, Nobody will fix it because it's connected to 3 issues. And that's a complicated situation based on a long-term issue. And so I thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm willing to work with anyone who needs advocacy within the city of Baltimore. I'm gonna stay, but I feel like people have to be heard, and it's just not words. You need to come out and see it. So thank you for your time, energy, and all of your efforts for all of those who are continuing to work on behalf of the residents of Baltimore City.
And thank you for your testimony. Ms. Collins, can you just state your first and last name for the record, please?
My name is Janine Collins.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to take one last look to see if we have any additional folks who want to testify via WebEx. And we do not have any additional testimony, so that's going to conclude testimony. We do want to thank everyone for joining us today. The committee is going to schedule a follow-up meeting in the future to get additional information and to continue this important discussion. This hearing is now in recess.